Sarah Peterson, the CEO of Precision Motors, looked out at the sprawling factory floor from her office window. Rows of cars gleamed under the bright lights, a testament to her company's success. But a nagging feeling tugged at her. She felt disconnected, like she was only seeing the finished product, not the hard work and challenges faced by the people who built it. Precision Motors was her father's legacy, and she'd taken the reins after his retirement. Sales were up, profits were soaring, but something was missing. She longed to understand the day-to-day struggles of her employees, the mechanics, the welders, the painters, the heart and soul of Precision Motors. She'd heard whispers of outdated equipment and increasing pressure to meet production quotas. Were her employees cutting corners to keep up? Were they putting themselves at risk? The thought kept her up at night. An idea began to form in her mind, a way to truly understand what was happening on the factory floor. She would go undercover. She would become one of them. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of planning and preparation. Sarah knew she couldn't just walk onto the factory floor and expect to blend in. She needed a believable backstory, a new identity. She decided to call herself Sally, a recent high school graduate eager to learn about cars. She traded her power suits for jeans and a simple t-shirt. Her perfectly styled hair was pulled back into a messy ponytail. She even removed her expensive jewelry, replacing it with a simple, inexpensive watch. She spent hours researching basic automotive repair, watching videos online and reading manuals. She knew she couldn't be completely clueless or she'd raise suspicion immediately. The hardest part was informing her executive assistant, Emily. Emily was fiercely loyal and incredibly discreet. Sarah knew she could trust her to keep the secret. Emily, though initially shocked, understood Sarah's motivation and pledged her full support, helping her with the logistics of creating a new employee file and arranging for her to be placed in the workshop. "Just be careful, Sarah," Emily cautioned. "Those tools can be dangerous even for experienced mechanics." Sarah nodded, a mix of excitement and trepidation swirling within her. "I will, Emily. I promise." The heavy metal door clanged shut behind Sally, and she stepped into a world of noise and activity. The air was thick with the smell of oil, grease, and welding fumes. The workshop was a vast space filled with car lifts, tool chests, and the constant roar of machinery. Mechanics in grease-stained overalls hurried between vehicles, their faces etched with concentration. This was it. Her first day as Sally. She clutched her lunch bag nervously as she made her way to the supervisor's office, a small, cluttered space tucked away in a corner. A gruff voice called out, "You the new trainee?" A man with tired eyes and a salt and pepper beard looked up from a stack of paperwork. This was Mark, her assigned supervisor. "Yes, sir," Sally replied, trying to sound as unassuming as possible. "I'm Sally," Mark grunted, waving her towards a nearby chair. "All right, Sally. I'm Mark. Don't expect any special treatment here. You'll be shadowing me for a while, learning the ropes. Keep your eyes open, your mouth shut, and try not to get in the way." He pointed to a toolbox overflowing with tools. "Now let's get to work. We've got a lot of cars to fix." Mark led Sally to a car on a lift, its engine exposed like an open wound. "All right, Sally," he said, pointing to a rusty bolt on the engine block. "Our first job, get this stubborn bolt off. It's holding up the whole repair." Sally peered at the bolt. It looked old and corroded, likely seized in place. "Looks like it's been there a while," she commented cautiously. "Tell me something I don't know," Mark retorted, grabbing a wrench from his overflowing toolbox. It was an old wrench, its jaws worn and slightly rounded. Sally recognized it instantly. It wasn't the right tool for the job. "All right, watch and learn," Mark said, positioning the wrench on the bolt. He leaned into it, putting his full weight behind it. The wrench slipped with a loud clang. "Careful," Sally exclaimed, instinctively reaching out. Mark glared at her. "I know what I'm doing, Sally. Just watch." He adjusted the wrench and tried again, grunting with effort. Again, the wrench slipped. Sally bit her lip, a knot of anxiety forming in her stomach. This wasn't just about a stubborn bolt, it was about safety. And Mark seemed determined to do it the hard way. Mark, undeterred by the slipping wrench, tried a different approach. He grabbed a hammer and began tapping the wrench, hoping to shock the bolt loose. "Sometimes you gotta persuade these things," he muttered, his brow furrowed in concentration. The hammer blows echoed through the workshop. Sally watched with growing apprehension. Hitting the wrench like that could easily cause it to slip even more violently, sending his hand crashing into the engine. "Is that really safe?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Mark stopped hammering and turned to her, his expression hardening. "Look, Sally, I've been doing this for 20 years. I know what I'm doing. You just need to watch and learn." He resumed hammering, each blow more forceful than the last. Sally felt a surge of frustration. She knew there were safer, more effective ways to remove a stubborn bolt. But Mark seemed resistant to any suggestions. She wondered if it was pride, stubbornness, or simply a lack of access to the right tools that was driving his dangerous methods. The sound of the hammer continued to reverberate, a constant reminder of the potential for an accident. After several more attempts with the hammer and wrench, all ending in slips and frustrated grunts, Sally decided to try a different approach. "Mark," she said hesitantly, "have you tried using a torque wrench? The kind with the adjustable settings?" Mark stopped and stared at her, wiping sweat from his brow with a greasy rag. "A torque wrench? We have one somewhere, probably buried under a pile of paperwork. Besides," he added dismissively, "those things are a pain to set up. Takes too long." "But it would grip the bolt better," Sally persisted, "and you could apply more even pressure. It would be safer, wouldn't it?" Mark sighed heavily. "Look, Sally, time is money. I don't have time to go searching for some fancy torque wrench. We just gotta get this bolt off and move on to the next job. Besides," he lowered his voice conspiratorially, "management is always breathing down our necks about meeting our quotas. Can't waste time fiddling with gadgets." Sally understood then. It wasn't just about the tools, it was about the relentless pressure to produce. Mark, fueled by frustration and the looming deadline, began applying even more force to the wrench. He braced his feet, tightened his grip, and pulled with all his might. His face turned red with exertion. "Mark, please be careful," Sally pleaded, her voice laced with genuine concern. She could see the strain on his muscles, the sweat dripping from his forehead. He was pushing himself to the limit. He ignored her, grunting with each pull. The wrench creaked ominously. Sally knew something was about to give. Either the bolt would finally break free, or the wrench would shatter, or worse, Mark would injure himself. The air was thick with tension, the only sound the creaking of the wrench and Mark's ragged breathing. Sally held her breath, bracing herself for the inevitable. She felt helpless, trapped in a situation she knew was heading for disaster. The pressure to meet quotas was clearly pushing Mark past his breaking point. With a deafening crack, the wrench slipped again, this time with even more force than before. Mark lost his balance, stumbling backwards. His hand, which had been gripping the wrench tightly, flew towards the engine block. Sally gasped, her heart leaping into her throat. He managed to twist his body at the last moment, narrowly avoiding a direct impact with a jagged piece of metal. But his knuckles still scraped against the sharp edge, drawing a thin line of blood. He swore under his breath, clutching his injured hand. "Mark, are you okay?" Sally rushed to his side, her voice filled with alarm. She grabbed a clean rag and gently pressed it against his bleeding knuckles. "Let me see," she said, examining the cut. It wasn't deep, but it was a stark reminder of how easily things could have gone wrong. Mark winced but pulled his hand away. "I'm fine, Sally. Just a scratch." But Sally could see the pain in his eyes, the shock still lingering on his face. He was shaken, even if he didn't want to admit it. The near miss had been a wake-up call, but would it be enough to change his approach? Seeing Mark's distress, Sally seized the opportunity to subtly guide him towards a safer approach. "Maybe we should take a break, Mark," she suggested gently. "Get a cup of coffee. Sometimes stepping away for a few minutes helps." Mark hesitated, glancing at the stubborn bolt as if it were mocking him. "I don't have time for coffee, Sally. We need to get this done." "Or," Sally continued, "maybe we could ask Jim for help? He's got that fancy bolt extractor kit. It might make things easier." Mark scowled. "I don't need Jim's help," he grumbled. "I can handle this." His pride was clearly wounded. He didn't want to appear incompetent in front of the new trainee. But Sally could see that his determination was bordering on recklessness. He was so focused on proving himself that he was willing to risk his own safety. The pressure to maintain his image combined with the pressure from management was a dangerous combination. Sally knew she had to tread carefully. She didn't want to push him too hard, but she couldn't stand by and watch him hurt himself. Determined to conquer the stubborn bolt, Mark rummaged through his toolbox again, this time pulling out a length of metal pipe. "All right, Sally," he announced, a glint of determination in his eye. "This should do the trick." Sally stared at the pipe in disbelief. "What are you going to do with that?" she asked, her voice laced with apprehension. Mark grinned, a slightly manic expression on his face. "I'm going to use it for leverage. Extend the handle of the wrench. More force, you see." He slid the pipe over the end of the wrench, effectively creating a much longer handle. Sally's heart sank. This was even more dangerous than before. By extending the handle, Mark was significantly increasing the force he could apply, but also increasing the risk of the wrench slipping or breaking. "Mark, that's not safe," she protested, her voice rising in alarm. "The wrench isn't designed for that much force. It could break and you could really get hurt. Mark ignored her pleas, positioning the wrench and pipe on the bolt. Just watch, Sally, he said, his voice tight with determination. This is how you get things done around here. He took a deep breath and began to pull. The force was too much. With a sharp, metallic snap, the bolt sheared clean off. The sudden release of pressure sent the wrench and pipe flying. Shards of metal scattered across the workshop floor like deadly confetti. Mark stumbled backwards, his eyes wide with shock. Sally screamed, instinctively ducking for cover. The sound of the snapping bolt echoed in her ears, a chilling reminder of the potential consequences of Mark's reckless actions. When the dust settled, they both slowly straightened up, surveying the scene. The broken bolt lay embedded in the engine block, a testament to its stubbornness. The wrench and pipe lay discarded on the floor, silent witnesses to the near disaster. Mark stood frozen, his face pale. He had pushed too far, and the result could have been catastrophic. He was lucky to be alive. Sally rushed to his side, checking him for injuries. Mark, are you all right? Did any of those pieces hit you? Mark just shook his head, his voice barely a whisper. I don't know. He looked at the broken bolt, then at the discarded tools, a flicker of understanding dawning in his eyes. He had finally realized the extent of his recklessness. Once they were both sure they were unharmed, Sally began carefully sweeping up the metal shards using a broom and dustpan she found nearby. Mark stood silently watching her, his usual gruff demeanor replaced with a quiet pensiveness. As she worked, Sally spoke softly, choosing her words carefully. Mark, she began, I know you were just trying to get the job done, but sometimes it's important to take a step back and think about safety. That wrench was clearly worn, and using the pipe just made things worse. She paused, allowing her words to sink in. There are tools specifically designed for removing stubborn bolts, tools that would have made this whole process much easier and safer. It's not worth risking your health for a single bolt or even for meeting a quota. She looked up at him, her eyes filled with sincerity. It's okay to ask for help, Mark. It doesn't make you weak. It makes you smart. She hoped her words were getting through to him, that he was finally understanding the importance of prioritizing safety over speed and pride. The incident had been a close call, but perhaps it would be a turning point. Mark finally broke his silence, his voice subdued. You're right, Sally, he admitted, his gaze fixed on the floor. I knew that wrench was bad news, but I just didn't want to fall behind. We're already swamped with work and the boss is always on our backs about meeting our numbers. He sighed, running a hand through his hair. I've been meaning to put in a request for a new wrench set for months, but the paperwork is a nightmare. It takes forever to get approved and then half the time they just deny it anyway. It's easier to just make do with what we have even if it's not safe. He looked up at Sally, his eyes filled with a mixture of frustration and resignation. It's not just the wrench, you know? Half the tools in this shop are outdated or broken. We're constantly patching things up, trying to keep them going. It's a miracle someone doesn't get seriously hurt more often. Sally's heart sank. She was beginning to understand the true extent of the problem. It wasn't just about a single stubborn bolt or a single worn wrench, it was a systemic issue of neglect and inadequate resources. The rest of the day passed without further incident, though the tension in the air remained palpable. Sally helped Mark with smaller tasks, carefully observing the other mechanics and the conditions they were working under. She noticed that Mark's story was not unique. Several other mechanics were using patched-up tools and improvising solutions to overcome equipment shortages. The pressure to meet quotas was evident in their hurried movements and stressed expressions. As the day drew to a close, Sally felt a mix of emotions. She was relieved that no one had been seriously injured, but she was also deeply troubled by what she had witnessed. The factory floor was not the well-oiled machine she had envisioned from her office window. It was a place where hard-working people were forced to compromise their safety due to systemic issues and a lack of support. She knew that she couldn't simply walk away and pretend she hadn't seen anything. She had a responsibility to these employees to provide them with the tools and resources they needed to do their jobs safely and efficiently. She made a silent vow to make things right. As Sally clocked out, she felt a profound shift within her. The initial excitement and curiosity she had felt about going undercover had been replaced by a deep sense of responsibility and determination. She knew that her time as Sally was coming to an end, but the impact of her experience would last a lifetime. She walked back to her car, shedding the persona of Sally with each step. She couldn't wait to return to her office to shed her disguise and face her management team. She had a story to tell, a story that needed to be heard. The weight of her CEO responsibilities felt different now. It wasn't just about profits and sales figures anymore, it was about the well-being of her employees, the people who were working tirelessly to build her company's success. She knew that the changes she needed to make wouldn't be easy, but she was ready to fight for them. She was no longer just a CEO looking at numbers, she was Sarah who had seen the reality of the factory floor with her own eyes. She had felt the tension, the pressure, and the danger. And she was ready to act. The next morning, Sarah walked into the conference room, no longer disguised as Sally, but as the CEO of Precision Motors. Her management team was already seated, a mixture of curiosity and apprehension on their faces. She had requested an urgent meeting, and they knew something important was about to be discussed. "Good morning," she began, her voice firm and resolute. "I've called this meeting to address some serious concerns I have about the safety and working conditions on our factory floor." She paused, letting her words sink in. "Yesterday, I went undercover as a new trainee in the workshop." A collective gasp filled the room. The team members exchanged bewildered glances. They couldn't believe what they were hearing. Sarah continued, "I witnessed firsthand the challenges our mechanics are facing, the outdated equipment they are forced to use, and the immense pressure they are under to meet production quotas." She recounted her experience with Mark, the stubborn bolt, and the near disaster that had followed. She described the outdated tools and the difficult requisition process. She spoke passionately about the need for change, for a culture that prioritized safety and valued the well-being of its employees. "We need to do better," she concluded, her voice filled with conviction. "We need to make things right." Sarah outlined her plan, a comprehensive overhaul of the company's safety protocols and resource allocation. First, she stated, "We will invest in new, state-of-the-art tools and equipment for all our workshops. No more patched-up wrenches or makeshift solutions." She continued, "Second, we will streamline the requisition process, making it easier for employees to request and receive the tools they need without unnecessary delays or bureaucratic hurdles. I want those requests to be filled within 24 hours whenever possible." Third, she announced, "We will implement mandatory safety training programs for all employees, emphasizing the importance of using the right tools and following proper procedures. Safety will be our top priority, not an afterthought." She looked at each member of her team, her gaze unwavering. "These changes will require a significant investment both in terms of money and time. But I believe it is an investment worth making. Our employees are our most valuable asset and their safety and well-being are paramount. I expect your full cooperation and support in implementing these changes effectively and efficiently." The room was silent, the team members absorbing the weight of her words. They knew that Sarah was serious and that things were about to change at Precision Motors. A few days later, Sarah, dressed in her usual CEO attire, returned to the workshop. This time, however, she wasn't undercover. She was there to show her employees that she meant business. The atmosphere was noticeably different. New tool chests lined the walls, gleaming with freshly organized equipment. Mechanics were attending safety training sessions, listening intently to the instructors. The air of tension and desperation had been replaced by a sense of cautious optimism. She spotted Mark working on a car, using a brand-new torque wrench to tighten a bolt. He looked up and saw her, his eyes widening in surprise. Sarah walked over to him, a warm smile on her face. "How are things going, Mark?" she asked. Mark hesitated for a moment, then a smile spread across his face. "Much better, Ms. Peterson," he replied. "These new tools are a lifesaver. And the new requisition process is a breeze. I put in a request for a new socket set last week, and it arrived the next day." He paused, then added, "I also learned a lot in the safety training. I realize now that I was taking unnecessary risks before. I'm grateful for the changes you've made." Sarah chuckled, "I'm glad to hear it, Mark. And please call me Sarah." She then leaned in conspiratorially and whispered, "Just promise me you won't use any more metal pipes on those wrenches." Mark laughed, a genuine, hearty laugh that reached his eyes. "No promises," he joked, "but I'll try my best." As Sarah walked away, she overheard Mark telling another mechanic, "You won't believe who that new trainee, Sally, really was." The other mechanic's jaw dropped in astonishment. The news of Sarah's undercover adventure spread like wildfire through the workshop, creating a buzz of excitement and disbelief. She spent the rest of the morning talking to the other mechanics, listening to their concerns and assuring them of her continued commitment to their well-being. She emphasized that safety was not just a policy, but a value, something that everyone at Precision Motors should embrace. She wanted them to know that their voices mattered, that their concerns would be heard, and that she was there to support them. She had finally bridged the gap between the executive office and the factory floor, creating a sense of unity and shared purpose. Precision Motors became a model for other companies, a shining example of how prioritizing employee well-being could lead to increased productivity and improved morale. Sarah continued to visit the factory floor regularly, not as an undercover trainee, but as a leader who understood and valued the contributions of her employees. She implemented an open-door policy, encouraging employees to voice their concerns and suggestions. The company's profits continued to rise, but more importantly, the employees felt valued and respected. They knew that Sarah had their backs, that she was committed to creating a safe and supportive work environment. And Mark? He became a champion for safety, mentoring new mechanics and sharing his experience as a cautionary tale. He even volunteered to lead the safety training sessions, using his near disaster with the stubborn bolt as a powerful example of the importance of following proper procedures and using the right tools. He and Sarah developed a strong working relationship built on mutual respect and a shared commitment to safety. The stubborn bolt, once a symbol of frustration and danger, became a reminder of the importance of listening, learning, and leading with compassion. And so, Precision Motors continued to produce high-quality cars, but now with a renewed sense of purpose and a commitment to safety and employee well-being. Sarah's undercover experience had not only transformed the company but had also transformed her as a leader. She learned the importance of empathy, of listening to the voices of those on the front lines, and of leading with compassion and understanding. She often reflected on her time as Sally, the new trainee, and the lessons she had learned from Mark and the other mechanics. She realized that true leadership was not about sitting in an office and making decisions from afar. It was about getting your hands dirty, understanding the challenges faced by your employees, and working together to create a better future. And every time she saw a Precision Motors car on the road, she felt a sense of pride, not just in the product, but in the people who had built it and in the company she had helped to transform into a model of success and compassion. The end.